avoiding the other's concerns. I'm kind of an expert on this. You know, and most families have somebody who's sort of the jokester or whatever. That was me and my family. And so whenever situations would get heated, which they often did, I would always try to come up with humor to just change what was going on, right? Because I didn't have any other skills, all right? So I would use diverting. Do you know anybody that whenever a conversation gets curious, they turn it into a joke? They divert with something that they think should be funny, which says to the other person, the way you're experiencing this is not important. Or do you know another way that you can do diverting is you bring everything back to yourself. So one of you comes back from a great vacation in the Cayman Islands and you start talking about it, and as soon as you get your first sentence out, somebody else interrupts you and says, oh, well, let me tell you about my vacation 5 years ago in Cancun. All right, so it has to come back to be about them. Have you ever noticed that sometimes in situations where somebody is starting to become emotional with the information they're sharing and somebody else is very uncomfortable with emotions, that they will find a way to divert that? Or you can even do it directly. My wife grew up in a family, she would tell you this, where her father was really, really threatened or intimidated by emotions, especially negative emotions. And so the kids in the family weren't allowed to be in a bad place emotionally at any meal. And if they were, they had to get up and leave. Now, what's the message in that? Right? But he had to divert because the negative emotions made him uncomfortable. Okay, logical argument is another way to divert. This is a person, and when we get to their Myers-Briggs type, there's a good chance that they have a strong preference for thinking. So they're really good at rational, logical, objective approaches, which is a gift and a good thing. But if you only can do that, then whenever anybody brings up anything that's emotional, you have to divert. So you do it with logical argument. Have you ever been accused, and women get accused of this more than men, have you ever been accused of being overly emotional by a guy, right? And the guy's, what is he doing? Remember, you see in the other person what you can't claim in yourself. This guy has a fear of being emotional, so when you get emotional, you're taking him to his place of fear, and he has to divert it, okay? I was quite often dealing with couplers where somebody was a really strong thinker and the other person was just wanting them to share an emotion, and so they'd always turn to their partner and say, so how do you feel? Just tell me how you feel about this. And then the thinker-type person would say, I feel it's a good idea. Now, I feel it's a good idea is not a feeling. That is a thought disguised as a feeling. Do you get what I'm saying? But they just couldn't go there. Okay, so they had to divert it. Reassuring. This is where somebody's emotions, often ones that we experience as painful, hurtful, negative, or whatever, somebody's expressing these kinds of things and it makes us uncomfortable, so we try to talk them out of it. So have you ever been with somebody who's, you know, really in a place of pain and you say to them, it's going to be okay. Really, you just need to, here, have a cup of tea. Here, we'll talk a little bit, or just get a good night's sleep, or why don't we get something to eat and I think you'll feel better. So we start trying to be a caretaker, but we're trying to reassure them. We're trying to talk them out of their negative emotions. And the problem with that is, Fritz Perls, who's a Gestalt therapist, now deceased, but he's a great quote he had was, feelings don't hurt. They just go through you. It's holding on that hurts. And so if you want to help somebody in a painful place emotionally, the most powerful way to do that is to create an environment where they feel safe to let the emotion go through them. And then they'll move on to something else. Those of you that have worked in customer service know that's exactly what you do with the angry customer who's spinning out of control. You don't judge, you don't blame, you just want this person to feel understood. So you just say, I understand. I think I'd feel like you do too if it happened to me. And you just listen some more and you make sure he knows that you're hearing everything he says and so on and so forth. And pretty soon what? The feeling goes through them and they move on to something else. So reassuring is a way of trying to talk people out of where they're at rather than being with them wherever they're at. And it's not as strong. So those are the dirty dozen. There's a 13th one. And that's where you tell somebody they're using one of these. Because do you hear the judgment in that? Right?